Well, we continue to see evidence of Canada's hot housing market, this time in the largest housing market, Toronto. Home sales nearly doubled in the Greater Toronto Area last month, and the average selling price climbed to almost $1.1 million. The red-hot conditions were especially notable outside the city of Toronto as detached home sales surge in the surrounding so-called 905 region, and even further, in fact, an hour drive away, you saw home prices and home sales eclipse what we saw in downtown Toronto. And is it any wonder that most Canadians expect that to continue? A fresh poll from Bloomberg and Nanos yesterday showing that most Canadians expect that the home prices will be higher in the next 6 months. In fact, the number of Canadians that believe that, or the percent of Canadians that believe that, has now reached nearly 70%. That's the highest that it has been in several years. So not just kind of a flash in the pan COVID dynamics driving this. People do believe that it is likely to continue. That also has an impact on momentum, because if you think it's likely to continue, you're perhaps more motivated through this so-called fear of missing out to get in the market now. Now, let's bring in some expert insight and analysis to all of this. We've got Jason Mercer. He's a senior market analyst at the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board that released these numbers. Jason, thank you so much for being with us. Maybe we can just start with, you know, the numbers are eye-popping, but it's March. And March of last year was kind of a tale of two types of cities, right? A pre-COVID city and a post-COVID city. How were you able to deal with that in the data?
That's correct. Well, in the release that we put out today, we certainly did, provide a bit of some history in terms of how things have unfolded in March of 2020, and certainly pointed out that if you look at the type of growth that we saw in the first half of March 2021 compared to the first half of March 2020, it was still very strong. I mean, you were seeing sales up by, close to 50% on a year-over-year basis. So continuing a trend that we had seen, say, through January and February. But at the same time, if you compared, obviously, the second half of March 2021 to the same period last year, sales were up by much more than double, because, we were comparing to that, initial, COVID phase where there was a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, and people had taken a bit of a step back because, we weren't sure to what degree people would be able to shift, for example, from the bricks and mortar office to the home office. But just giving a nod to one of your earlier stories, is that happened relatively quickly. And that's why we're seeing a lot of confidence in people's ability to purchase and pay for a home over the long term, because, by and large, we have seen a recovery in a lot of sectors, particularly those average to above average income sectors that support home ownership.
And COVID is kind of all over these statistics. When you look at the areas with the highest sales growth, but also the highest price growth, it's not in the downtown core. It's outside of the city. It's for detached homes. And in fact, downtown condos saw their prices decline from a year earlier. So it seems like COVID and the new changing dynamics, the new work from home dynamics, are really driving where people want to live right now.
Yeah, we certainly started to see a marked recovery in the housing market overall, or in the aggregate, since the summer and fall of 2020. And one of the key drivers of that recovery, has been the low-rise market segment, the single-family market segments in the areas surrounding the city of Toronto. Initially, the condominium apartment market did lag. We've seen it recover quite a bit in some of the surrounding suburban areas. And you mentioned that on a year-over-year basis, the average selling price for condos was down in the city of Toronto as well. But we have seen an improvement in that price level there as well. And so moving forward, we expect to see some positive numbers for condo prices in the 416 area code as we move into the second half of 2021.
So that's interesting, because I think that's the wild card question, is how much of this trend is permanent. And if we are in flux, right, that raises all kind of questions about whether there should be a policy response now, or whether, it's better to adopt a wait and see approach to see, okay, once vaccines are out there, once people are back to normal, where do they actually want to live? Does the city become more attractive?
The most important policy response, I think, whether you're thinking about, where we stand in the housing market right now or where we're going to stand years into the future, is making sure we have enough supply coming online to meet population growth. And so thinking about further recovery, I mean, one of the main tenets of the federal recovery plan is to see a real uptick in population growth driven by immigration. And historically, the Greater Toronto Area has been Canada's single greatest metropolitan beneficiary of immigration, and we'd expect that to continue. And so once we see, broader vaccine uptake, both in Canada and globally, and we start to see a resumption of immigration and a resumption of non-permanent migration into the Greater Toronto Area, then the supply issues that we're facing right now are going to become even more acute. And so policymakers at all levels of government are looking at ways to see a more sustainable housing market, a more affordable housing market moving forward. Then we need to see more supply coming online. I think by and large policymakers get it, but what we need to move is from policy papers into shovels in the ground and in short order.
And that's kind of a long-term solution to supply. I'd like to talk about short-term supply and what we're seeing in new listings, because your data shows that this is not a situation where people are just, sitting on their homes. New listings also surge. It's just that sales and demand surge so much more that homes are virtually being snapped up the moment they go on the market.
And that's right. I mean, we're expecting to see an uptick in new listings as we move through the spring, and that's just driven by price growth in general. People looking to take advantage of the equity that's built up in their homes, and obviously at the same time to take advantage of low borrowing costs and the confidence they have in their employment situation. But at the same time, there's a greater number of people compared to last year, and that's been the case, over the last few months. There's a greater number of people looking to buy than are looking to list their homes for sale. And while that situation has really come under the magnifying glass during the COVID period, it was a scenario that was starting to unfold again as we had moved through 2019 and the first part of 2020 as well. And so, again, COVID's really sort of put the microscope on the situation, but it was starting to develop or redevelop even in the pre-COVID period.
You highlight something that's really important is these numbers are eye-popping, but it's also just the beginning. This is March. The spring selling season kind of really kicks off in earnest this month and carries out for the next couple of months. So it seems like what you're saying is this is probably not the end of the kind of record-smashing numbers we're going to see in housing.
Again, I mean, if you think about the drivers of demand, I mean, obviously low borrowing costs have been one factor. Many sectors of the economy have recovered and continue to recover. And you're right. Thinking about broader vaccine take-up as we move through the spring and summer and into the fall, and what that'll mean for overall population growth. The demand for housing in the GTA, whether you're talking about ownership housing or rental housing, I would expect to remain strong as we move through 2021 and into 2022.